Great Baal, Lord of the heavens,
Send forth the rain.
We praise your name.
In the days of King Ahab, Israel had turned away from the Lord. The people worshipped false gods, and evil spread throughout the land. Ahab, influenced by Queen Jezebel, led the nation deeper into sin than the kings before him. But in the middle of that darkness, God raised up a prophet, a man named Elijah. Elijah came from Tishbe, a rugged man from a rugged place. He was not a king, not a warrior, not a priest in the temple, but he carried the word of the living God.
Elijah appeared before Ahab with a message from the Lord. There would be no rain, no dew, and no harvest in Israel, except at God's command. The heavens closed. Days turned into months. Months turned into years. The land withered under a devastating drought. God told Elijah to hide by the brook Chariot. There, in the wilderness, God sustained him in a miraculous way. Ravens brought him bread and meat morning and evening, and he drank from the brook. Even in isolation, even in famine, God did not forget his servant. But eventually, the brook ran dry, and once again God spoke. God sent Elijah to Zarephath, where a widow was gathering sticks for a final meal. She had only a handful of flour and a little oil, just enough for herself and her son. After that, she expected to die. But Elijah told her not to fear. If she trusted the Lord and gave first from what little she had, God would provide. And God did. Day after day, the flour did not run out. The oil did not fail. In a season of death, God gave life. Then tragedy struck. The widow's son became sick and stopped breathing. Elijah cried out to God, and the Lord answered. The boy's life returned. Through Elijah, God showed his power, not only over nature, but over life itself. After years of drought, God sent Elijah back to Ahab. It was time for a showdown. On Mount Carmel, Elijah gathered the people of Israel and the prophets of Baal. He challenged the people with a question. How long would they waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. The test was simple. The prophets of Baal would call on their God. Elijah would call on the Lord, the God who answered by fire. He alone would be recognized as the true God. All day long the prophets of Baal cried out. They shouted, they danced, they begged, but nothing happened. No voice, no answer, no fire. Then Elijah repaired the broken altar of the Lord. He placed the sacrifice on the wood. He even drenched the altar with water again and again, until a trench around it overflowed. Then Elijah prayed. Immediately the fire of the Lord fell. The people cried out that the Lord, He is God. After the fire came another miracle. Elijah prayed for rain. At first there was nothing, but Elijah kept praying. Then a small cloud appeared, no bigger than a man's hand. Soon the sky grew dark, the wind rose, and the rain came pouring down. The drought was broken. The God of Elijah had answered. But even prophets can grow weary. When Queen Jezebel threatened Elijah's life, fear overcame him. He ran into the wilderness, exhausted and discouraged. In despair, Elijah asked God to let him die. He felt alone. He felt finished. He felt like he was the only one left. But God met Elijah in his weakness. An angel brought him food and water, and Elijah found strength for the journey ahead. At the mountain of God, Elijah waited for the Lord. A mighty wind came, but the Lord was not in the wind. Then an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Then fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. There, in the quiet, Elijah heard the voice of God. God reminded Elijah that he was not alone. There were still thousands in Israel who had not bowed to Baal, and God still had work for him to do. God instructed Elijah to anoint a new king and to call a successor. That successor was Elisha. Elijah placed his cloak upon him, and Elisha left everything behind to follow. The mission would continue. God's word would not end with one man. At the end of Elijah's earthly ministry, something extraordinary happened. As Elijah and Elisha walked together, a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared between them. And Elijah was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind. The prophet who had called down fire from heaven was carried into glory, but the God who had been with Elijah remained with his people. Elijah's story is a story of courage, faith, and the power of God. He stood against kings, challenged false worship, prayed for miracles, and heard God's voice in silence. He reminds us that even in times of drought, fear, and uncertainty, the Lord is still God. And the God of Elijah is still able to provide, to restore, and to reveal himself today.